Okay.
Good evening. We are broadcasting here, and welcome to the monthly RELO Bangkok AUA webinar. I am Trisha Smith-Pierce. I will be the host tonight, and we are very excited to welcome Mindy Olson here. She is an English language fellow with the U.S. Department of State, and she is at Budapest University in Chonburi, Thailand. She will be sharing some easy, specific ways to help your students be more actively engaged in reading. And we'll have it be about an hour long, and there's time for questions at the end. But if you do have some questions that you would like to be asked along the way, please put them in the Q&A box, and we'll take care of them as appropriate. Here's Mindy. Take it away, Mindy.
Okay. Hi. Thank you very much, Trisha, for that nice introduction. As she told you, I am a second-year fellow, English language fellow at Budapest University, and my first career was I've been a reader for as long as I can remember, and I'm very excited and passionate about reading and writing, and I'm looking forward to sharing some ideas with you in this webinar. So we're going to start with a poll. I want to know who is out there, if anyone is out there yet. I know it's kind of just checking in.
We have a good number of participants, and I just launched the poll, and it looks like that we've got a lot of university, about 60% right now are university teachers. We have some secondary school, about a third, now a quarter, and some other out there. So, we have some primary school teachers out there. That's great.
That's fantastic. Well, good. I'm glad to hear that we have such a range of teachers, or such a range of grades, and I hope that the techniques and ideas that I share with you here today, you'll be able to use them in whatever level of students you teach. So let's talk first. Why do you think students might find reading boring? Let's hear from you. I know I have. Yes, oops, sorry.
In the chat box, why don't you go ahead, everyone, and say in the chat box what Mindy's question.
Yeah, why do you think students might find reading, quote unquote, boring? I have some ideas myself. I know you have lots of experience you can share. So I hope to hear.
Some of our panelists are saying it's because you have to, or the content is too complicated. It's drudgery, difficult vocabulary is what some of the panelists are saying.
Okay, I agree with all of those reasons for having boring reading. Texts are too advanced. Sometimes they're just assigned. You don't have any choice. You have to get through them. So yeah, I hope I can come up with some answers for some of those ideas. I teach classes here at Budapest, and I found that my students also they find reading boring. And what I find with them, they try to finish the text as quickly as possible. I'll give them in-class time, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or whatever, and after 2 minutes, they're done. They don't look up words in their dictionaries on their phones, or they raise their hand and they ask me what's the definition of a word when it's in the glossary at the bottom of the page. And very few of them write down any vocabulary words as they're going along, to look up and save and savor and explore later. Also, a lot of the, really good students go straight to the questions at the end of the text, look to see what they are, and then skim back through the article or the text, and so they can fill out the answers right away. So none of these ways of reading really makes me think that they're enjoying it in the least bit. So I've come up with some ways to get students to collaborate while they read, and everybody loves to socialize, and especially university students. And so, I think it's true of every student everywhere, talk to their friends. So I've come up with some collaborative techniques for students to read together. A lot of people think of reading as a very lonely one-person activity, but in fact, it can be a social activity. This theory, many years to Vygotsky's social cognition theory, which posits that students internalize information more, they own it more when they collaborate with other people, when they're in a social context. And you have students of different abilities in your hallways. And that's one of the challenges, is that you have more proficient students with lesser proficient students. And they work together in a group, they can help each other learn. Also, it's active learning. They can get out, move around, gather information. Sometimes there's a task. And most important, it's student-centered. So you can sit back, relax, facilitate the whole process, and help students as they're going through their thinking processes, that it's not just a question of being in the front of the room talking while everyone's listening and trying to pretend that they're paying attention. Okay, let's keep going. So this is sort of a rough idea of the process of reading. Reading isn't really linear. It's not even, these different stages of reading can happen at the same time, out of order, but roughly speaking, there's pre-reading, engagement, comprehension, critical thinking, and reflection. So the question is, how can these areas be made collaborative? Before we get started, I would like to remind myself and everyone that a lot of these activities here are thinking routines, and they are much better when they are repeated in the course of a semester or a year of teaching. The great thing about repeating them is that you don't have to explain everything every time. The students understand. If you say, okay, we're going to do, I think, I wonder, they're like, okay, I know how that works. And also, once the students know the routine, they become much more fluid, and also their thinking becomes more complex. And as teachers become more familiar with the routines, they can think of new ways or new applications or ways to make it more meaningful for the students also. So also, thinking takes time. Group activities are very time consuming. Allow enough time, plus some, for students to get into the activity, for shy students to step forward, for the dynamic of the group to play out. It works best if you have plenty of time. All right. I've got 3 different activities I'd like to talk about in the pre-reading area. And again, a lot of these can be modified for different subjects besides reading, and for different places in the process. KWL is one that some of you might be familiar with. A predicting activity, I think, I wonder, and 2 sides for corners. So KWL, this is a modification of an activity that is for an individual student, but how it works is students make on a paper and label 1 K for what I know or what we already know, W, what we want to know, and L for what we have learned. And they can work with a partner or in a very small group, say 3 people, to decide, share information about, they write down the list of all the things they know, sharing their knowledge, and do the double of things they want to know, and save that paper. The L will come later in the reflection part of the video, the webinar. So another great activity which I use very often in my class, my students love it, I love it, and it's great, You show students a photo from the book that you're reading, the textbook, the photos, or something that relates to the material in the book. And if it's kind of mysterious or, has details that need decoding, that's good. At the end of this webinar, I've got a page of resources that you can go to for photos, free graded readers. A big complaint is that the reading material is too difficult. So you can find graded readers, photos, art, all kinds of free open source materials. So that's at the end. Anyway, so let's see. Here's a photograph. It's a famous photograph from US. And you could just project this on the screen. So the first question is, I see. So students individually are going to look at this photograph or whatever you've got, and individually the student writes down 3 statements. One is I see, one is I wonder. So it might be I see a woman, a child, a baby, a plate, all those things. I think they might be poor. I wonder, see how it goes. Then in groups, students share their individual statements, and as a group they need to decide on a statement for the group. So they're going to come out together with a statement that says we see, we think, we wonder, the statements of the people in the group. And then they can share it with the class. It's simple. The more you do it, the faster it goes, and it can be really a lot of fun. 2 sides, 4 corners is one way to get students to think critically about a subject. Most texts now have some kind of contrasting opinion of different sides. So you're going to examine your text for these different opinions, different sides, and write a statement on the board. So for example, spicy food is good for your health, or women have better communication skills than men. And at that point, your students are going to divide into agree or disagree. So say spicy food is good for your health. Everyone who agrees to the left, everyone who disagrees to the right. Yeah. Then you can have the people on the different sides of the room discuss. Why do they agree? Why do they disagree with that statement? They're all in agreement, so it makes it easy to talk. Then, if you want to make it really interesting, you can combine the groups and have them discuss why their differences in opinion. They can try to persuade the other people of the fact that they're right, or just kind of discuss it. I find in my classes it's hard to get people to disagree, but forming an opinion, thinking critically, is one of the ways that people engage with texts in a really deep and meaningful way. So this is a great sort of pre-reading activity. Okay. The other thing you can do too is, instead of just 2 sides, you can make it into 4 corners. So if people don't strongly agree, but they agree, they can go into one corner. Or if they don't strongly disagree, but they sort of disagree. So that's another variation. Another great thing about this activity is your students are up, they're moving, they're talking to each other, they're having a great time. And again, it's very student focused. Okay, poll time. Which of these activities did you like the best? You know, maybe that you like them all, but I want you to just pick one that you think you might be able to use in your classroom.
Okay, Mindy, we are getting some great responses here. It looks like 2 sides, 4 corners is winning out at like 40%. Because it gets people up and moving is what some people are saying, and talking. Mm-hmm. And so that's really, we've got, I think I see, I think I wonder, at about a quarter of the people think that KWL. Lots of people are saying that they do really love KWL, and that number 3 seems to be more engaging. So we have some real fans of 2 sides, 4 corners here.
Great, That's fantastic. KWL is not the newest technique of these three. I did see an idea in one of the, I think it was a previous looking at, to make a bookmark out of a KWL paper and then have a place on the back for vocabulary words. That sounded like a great idea. I haven't actually tried it, but I'd like to. Oh, good, yeah. So there we have it. All right, well, I'm glad. I hope, you know, you may have tried these in your classes in the past. If you haven't, give them a try. They're really kind of fun.
Okay, Mindy, we have some really interesting responses to this poll, and I wanted to share some of them with you if I think you find them interesting. Many people are saying that they're really excited to try out like number 2 in their classroom. And then another one, 2 sides or 4 corners, all that it seems brilliant for their students. They really are excited about that one. And maybe KWL would be good at the very beginning of the class to figure out the general level or insight of the students have. But number 3 is really engaging. So that's basically, people are really impressed with the 2 sides, 4 corners is what we've got going on here.
Fantastic. Well, I'm so happy. And it's really a zero prep kind of activity. You know, you can just, thinking of the statement is the hardest part. And then after that, everything, you know, follows. So fantastic. Good, good. Okay. Well, let's continue on to the next section here. Problem.
Bear with us while we have a little bit of a technical challenge.
Okay.
There we go. Excellent. We're back.
Okay, so here in the engagement, comprehension, and critical thinking section, I have 2 different kinds of activities. And when I say activities, they're really sort of thinking processes. And one thing I'd like to kind of point out right now is that all these activities are so great, and the temptation is to try them all, which is what I've done. My students are used to being, you know, having some new activities sprung on them every week, and it is great to try them all out. But the question is, the basic question I think is, what kind of learning arc do you want your students to have? And from that point of view, then what sort of activities fit best within that context. So it's great to, you know, pull these activities up and get them going, and I encourage you to do so. After a while, though, it's better if you can integrate them into your into the learning curve of your course, of your class. Okay, so jigsaw reading and circle of viewpoints. Jigsaw reading. This is a grade appropriate reading, you know, ideally one that has a different idea or topic in each paragraph. And then you letter or number the paragraphs, for example, A, B, C. And then you are going to place students in groups. And you give the same paragraph, A, maybe, to each member of the group. So you maybe have a group of 3 or a group of 4. Together, they have to read the paragraph and then find some consensus on the main idea and the details. So this is sort of a chart that you can have, you know, the students can fill out. It looks a lot like a handout, and I'm trying to get away from handouts. So my suggestion, what I've been doing, is to just have them write the chart in their notebook or on their tablet or whatever they've got, and do it that way. Of course, you can make the handouts if you want to, but who wants to? Not me. Okay, so for example, paragraph A is about Brazilian culture. What kind of greeting is appropriate? How close do people stand? Do they touch each other? Paragraph B is, follows from paragraph A, and it's about how Brazilians greet each other. how, how do Japanese greet each other? How close do they stand? How formal are they? So they're two complete topics. If you're just starting out with this activity, of course, you want to model it for your students so they get the idea. So the main idea, Brazilians are informal, friendly. Details, important to say hello, goodbye, women kiss everyone, men shake hands, touch, okay. But eventually, your students are going to be able to do this on their own, and they're going to go define the main idea and the details for paragraph B and paragraph C. When they've done that, you then put them into different groups so that each member of the group has the main idea and the supporting details for a different paragraph. So this is where the jigsaw comes in. They share the information with each other, writing down the main idea and the supporting details for each paragraph. Here we have, I think it was 3 paragraphs. You can make the list as long as you want. If it's 10 paragraphs or 5 paragraphs, make 5 groups, right? So it's very adaptable for a little bit more, for upper primary or secondary or university. But yeah. All right, so for example, that's kind of I didn't fill out C because that was C. All right, next one, circle of perspective. This activity gets students to think about characters from different points of view. Thinking about other perspectives and thinking about what is my perspective, how do other people see this differently from me, is one of the essential components of critical thinking. So it's a great way to get students to see things from different perspectives. This is from a book called Making Thinking Visible. I've really enjoyed this book. I think 2 of the activities here are from that book. And it's in the references at the end. Anyway, so show students a photo or a picture from their book or a text or one that's related to the subject matter. And then you can put students in groups of, I think, up to 5. You can have more if you want. Ask each student to choose a person or an animal or an object from the picture. So for example, this is a picture that I've used in my culture class, teaching about slavery in the United States. But I showed it to them in the midst of just talking about general ideas of the United States, formation. Anyway, I asked my students to look at this picture and then choose one of the. So for example, you can see there are a lot of characters here, or you can choose the dog, or you can choose the gun, or you can choose one of those cotton balls that's in the foreground, or the sky, or the ground, or the trees, right? Or the hat. There are so many different perspectives. And then ask the students to write a line or 2 of dialogue based on their character. So, for example, the dog in the photo might say, "Let me down, I don't like being next to this gun," right? So the students are going to share their dialogue lines with the group, and then they can either do like a little role play using their dialogue, or they can have they can say their dialogue and have the other students guess which character they are. So it's a really fun way to engage with the text and just with the concept of different perspectives. We only have 2. I wish we had more. I found so many great activities. I'm going to have to do another webinar. There's not enough time to cover everything.
Mindy, if I may interrupt, we have a question about the jigsaw. And they were wondering about the time for the jigsaw. If the text is too hard to understand, maybe the jigsaw is too time consuming. So how do you manage that? And how do you kind of gauge how long a jigsaw activity would take?
Good question. It depends on the level of the students. Obviously, But for example, the example that I used, the different kinds of culture, you know, Brazilian versus Japanese culture, I think my students for that second year students, and I would give the part where the students come up with their own main idea and supporting details for the paragraph, I would allow them a good 8 to 10 minutes to do that. Then, depending on how many paragraphs are in the text, it can take, I don't think it would be really useful for anything over about 5 or 6 paragraphs, honestly. You could divide it up so that, you know, the groups come up with the first 3 and then you share those papers with the other group. But yeah, so depending on how many paragraphs there are to share, to jigsaw in, I would say probably about 4 to 5 minutes for each paragraph, certainly. You know, students are going to be writing down basically they're just copying what the other group came up with. So they don't have to really discuss it that much, although they do get to read it out loud and talk about it. But yeah, I would say about maybe 5 minutes per paragraph. Does that answer the question?
Yes. One thing I just did the poll for you, and I'll share the results there. It looks like that most people like the jigsaw reading a little bit more than the circle of perspectives. I do have one here that says, I love Tour of the Four Corners with the jigsaw. That's what one person said. So kind of combining those two together
I'm thinking
is what I think that they were getting at there.
Wow, I love how those sparks are flying here. That's great. Awesome. Yeah. Yeah, that's fantastic. You can combine these activities in different ways. Yeah. The jigsaw reading is more focused on reading, certainly. So that's definitely worth considering. Another activity that I didn't get into here, but which I was just reading about today, is called red light, yellow light. And it's going through a text and marking down passages are slow you down and which passages just stop you, right? And sharing that in a group. I thought that was a really fun thing to do as well, but maybe for another time. All right, well, I'm glad it looks like it's kind of divided half and half here, or a little bit more for jigsaw reading. So good. If you picked one, try it out. It works. And like I said, you know, for younger students, it probably will also take a long time because they, you know, even if the text is easier, they're going to take a while to decide what is the main idea, what are supporting details. But it goes faster the more you do it.
Mindy,
yes.
another question we have, this is about the circle of perspective. And they said, if we choose circle of perspective, how do we find the main idea?
How do you find the main idea in circle of perspectives?
Yes, like, could you find the main idea if in the circle of perspectives, you know, you take it from each angle, this person wants to know is that, can you use it to find the main idea? I think that's what the question's trying to get at.
Okay. I think you maybe could. The idea that the dialogue would create kind of, maybe the dialogue could provide some kind of clues to what the main theme is. For example, looking at that picture of the cotton and the African Americans and the guy with the gun, how many are happy? So you could, the dialogue might point the way to what the main idea is, I think. Once you start considering the subject from a lot of perspectives, the main idea is somewhere in the middle, I would guess.
Excellent. Thank you, Mindy. We don't have any more questions right now with this, so I think we can go on. Great.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for chipping in. I'm really appreciating this. I'm so excited to share all this. Okay, next to the process of reading. So we have covered some pre-writing, did I say pre-writing? I'm sorry, pre-reading activities. KWL, I see, I think, I wonder, and 2 sides, 4 corners. And we've learned some activities for engagement, comprehension, critical thinking, jigsaw, and circle of perspectives. So reflection. This is one of my very favorite aspects of teaching. It's especially important in reading. I mean, have you ever put down a book and just had your mind expanded because of it? The more you think about it, the more you personalize it, the more you, the information and the ideas become more concrete in your mind and in your memory. So reflection, I think, is just a great way to get students to think of themselves as intellectual beings, right? To engage with, to ask them to engage with text in a way where they're a meaningful participant in that process. And for a lot of teachers, reflection is solitary. You know, they say, I want you to write about what did you think of the book or something, but it doesn't have to be solitary. It can happen in a group. So carry on. Reflection ideas, KWL. Remember L, what I learned. So we're going to go back to that and review that. Another activity called sentence, phrase, word. And finally, exit tickets, which you may or may not be familiar with. I'm going to start with K. So remembering back to KWL, students wrote a list of things they knew, things they wanted to know, and finally, they're going to be talking about the things they have learned, right? So the idea is to get students in pairs to talk about how does the list of things that they learned compare with the list of things they wanted to know. That everything they wanted to know, or do they still have questions? And then if students are in pairs, I like to get them to, it's sort of called think, pair, square. They go to another pair of students and they share what they learned, what they wanted to learn, and of course what they already knew. And that way everybody's sharing everything that they know, that they wanted to know, and that they learned. So it's a group activity. This activity is called sentence, phrase, word. Students individually review a short text or a poem, and each student writes down, so now it's just individual, it's not in a group. Each student writes down one sentence, one phrase that was moving or that thought-provoking, and one word that seemed powerful, that seemed to, you know, be a word that was the main idea of that text. Now, if you're teaching elementary school students, you might want to just, you know, make it sentence, right? It doesn't have to, you can modify it in any way you want. This is another exercise from this book, Making Thinking Visible. Great book. Okay, so for example, this is a part of a poem from a book published by the US State Department. And it's only one statement from the poem. Having a friend is like planting a flower. Show love and kindness, it one day will bloom. Let's be aware as we walk on this planet, even the tiniest creature needs room, right? So it's a sweet poem. It's not very challenging unless, you know, for a secondary or university. The sentence that I chose as I was doing this exercise was, let's be aware as we walk on this planet. There are no punctuation marks, so you can pick whatever phrase or sentence looks good to you. I like the phrase, the tiniest creature. It got me thinking about, what is the tiniest creature? Is it a bug? Is it a fungus? Bacteria? So that kind of got me thinking. And then the word that I chose was kindness, right? That's the word that made me sort of was an emblem or a symbol for this little poem. You can, of course, the longer the piece, the more choices you have. And the idea too is that students pick a word that is inside their phrase or a phrase that is inside their sentence. They should be from 3 different parts of the text. Okay, so then in a discussion group, the students are going to discuss their choices. They can start with the words first, then the phrases, then the sentence, or do it the other way. Start with the then the phrases, then the words. And in a group, they're going to talk about why they made the choices that they made.
Mindy, I have a question here from David that has to do with the discussion. And so that's why I wanted to step in, if that's okay. He says, do you think that the sentence, phrase, word could be used to reflect after a class discussion as opposed to reading? Or in addition to reading? Like that it could be used in both those situations. What do you think about that?
I think a class discussion is a great place to I think it's great to reflect after a class discussion. I think it might be a little bit difficult to be trying to pick out sentences and phrases and words in the midst of a discussion, unless maybe they were on the board, you know, unless the teacher was writing them on the board as you were discussing things. That could definitely work. If you're having a great discussion and, you know, the students or the teachers could, you know, they'd think of some great idea, run up to the board, the teacher could write down the points that he or she is hearing the students say. So I love the idea. I think it, you know, rather than sentences or maybe even, I think phrases or words might be more manageable in that context. Maybe even just one word, you know, or one phrase. The phrase or the word that you're taking away from this discussion, and then have them discuss that. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I love how everyone's starting to think really like, how can I adapt this and change it and put it in my class, in my context? That's just wonderful. I love how you're really engaged, everyone. It's wonderful. Okay, Mindy, sorry, now go ahead.
Okay, so some of the things students might try to identify, what themes seem to be coming up, you know, what themes seem to be important. What did their choices imply? What are they picking out from this text? What does that mean about them? And were there some parts of that text that they missed? So all good questions and of course there are no right or wrong answers here. This is a way to get students to think actively and to engage with text. And whatever answers they come up with are perfectly valid. But hear them say why they chose those words, phrases, and sentences, certainly. So yeah, it's a very thought-provoking activity. Now, this is the exit tickets. This is, I got this from another fellow. It's an easy, no prep exit ticket. You can get students to do these collaboratively, I'm sure. You know, one thing we will take away, one thing we really like, just as you can adapt the KWL for a collaborative activity. But really the reason that I love exit tickets is that they are more a collaboration between the student and the teacher. You can use exit tickets to think about a text. So one idea I will take away from the text, one thing I really liked was, one question I have is, one thing I might change about the text is too difficult, the text was too long, we didn't have enough time to read it, you know, the type was too small. Many things I think students would change about reading if they could, but they never get asked. So the other brilliant thing about this exit ticket is that you don't need to bring anything to class except maybe half sheet of A4 scrap paper for the students, or they can just tear a paper out of their notebook or whatever. Any small rectangular piece of paper will do. Students fold it in half again, And then they don't even have to write the prompts. They can just put in an arrow at the top left, a plus sign at the top right, question mark on the bottom left, and a triangle on the bottom right. And I can honestly say that since I've started using exit tickets, I've become a complete convert. I enjoy reading them. I'm especially appreciative when students or have like ideas for things that they would change. I'm gratified when they tell me they liked something or that they're taking away an idea. And students are really honored to be asked for their opinion. I promise them that I will read them all, and I do. And some amazing observations, and it's one of the purest forms of reflection I found. You can also use these not just to reflect on a text. You can have them reflect on the day's class or even the entire course. So I would, if you haven't tried these yet, once you start, I think they'll really. Okay, so let's reflect on the reflection activities. Which one, so you can pick one only, do you like the best to try out in your classroom? Do you like the KWL, what we've learned, kind of dovetailing with the KWL in the pre-reading? Like the sentence, phrase, word, or do you like the exit tickets?
Looks like we're getting a lot of people really like that exit ticket. It's genius. I think your introduction of that's the first time I'd ever seen it in that format. I've used exit tickets before, but having it in the 4 squares with the symbols was great. And so far, that is far and away our favorite. I'm going to close the poll here in just a few minutes, and I'll share it with you all.
Okay, I gave it a big pump up too. So that's the sentence, phrase, word I really like a lot. It's a lot more open-ended, and I think a lot of intimidated by having to think about big ideas. But again, it's one of those things that I have a feeling, I haven't used it much myself, but I have a feeling the more I use it, the more I'm going to like it. Students are going to like it too. So yeah, and of course KWL is like great, great dependable way of self-assessment too. Okay, great. Well, to hear something from the participants. Do you have any suggestions? Were there any questions in the question box? Is there anything you'd like to share with me and with the other participants that you like to do in your classroom? Or do you have any suggestions for how to combine different activities that we talked about tonight? So chat away.
Okay. Until we get some people in the chat box, I'm going to ask a few of the questions that came up throughout the time. The first one is, I'm going to turn on my video here since I'm actually talking.
Hi, there you are.
Yes, hello everyone. Do you think technology plays an important role in making students more engaged in the reading materials?
That's a really good question. I think technology is a good way for students to engage with reading materials. A lot of them, that's the only way they engage with materials. Textbooks and paper texts are kind of, old-fashioned for a lot of our students. I think it's hard for me to read on a small screen. I can read laptop, but I think too the problem with technology is there's so many distractions. When you're on your computer or on your phone, you might be reading something and you're getting notifications about somebody's going out, bubble tea, and somebody else is like a story, and it's really hard to focus. There's something about actually having a text in front of you that's on paper. I think that's very valuable. But definitely it's a new world, and I think students do engage with text in almost, maybe more than 50% experience with on computers and digitally. So it's a challenge. It is.
Okay, I'm gonna share some things from the from our chat box with us all, and we have prediction works well on pre-reading. So using prediction, that's a great thing that we have as a suggestion. And then another person said, I use a running race for engagement. I'm not exactly sure what.
I think I know, I've heard of running race.
Yeah.
Where you have questions about the text, right? And you give you have teams, and then you give each team a group of questions, or they pick a hat or something.
Yes.
They have to run down to the end of the room and look at the text, find the answer to the question, come back, tell their team, write down the answer, and then repeat with a different question. Am I right? Is that running?
I think so. Yes, that's exactly right. That's what I think. I'd heard it called by some other fancy name, but yes, that sounds right. There's also, I wanted to share with the chat that people are also going to use the sentence, phrase, word at the end of the semester to summarize the entire experience in their class. I think that sounds like a great idea there.
Fantastic reflection, yeah.
So I'm going to ask one more question. This is a general question. It says, how do you make your students like to read?
Oh, gosh.
That's a hard one.
It is a hard one. I think part of it is just being very enthusiastic about it oneself. I think the best people who communicate the enthusiasm for reading are people who have enthusiasm for reading. And I suggest that anybody who wants to teach reading, read a fair amount if you can. I know everyone's so busy, but if you're teaching English, try to read some interesting things in English yourself so you can share them with your students or modify them to get to their level. Students better than anyone. So I know a lot of times I'm using a textbook that's supposed to be for my level students, and it's not. It's much too advanced for them. So if you find something that's really, captivating to you, even if it's something on some silly, internet website or something, if it's about bubble tea or something that you're interested in, pick it up, take out all the difficult words, replace them with simpler ones for your students, and let them have a go at it. And if you liked it, they'll like it. But, it is hard to get students to love reading. Give them really interesting things to read, too, for crying out loud. A lot of these academic textbooks, some of them have very interesting texts, and those are the ones to look for. I think all of my students are tired of reading about how to be a successful student, how to have a positive attitude. These are all great, suggestions and good advice for them, but it's a little overdone. So I'd like to see a little more creativity, especially in academic writing.
Yes. Now, Mindy, I wanted to ask, we do have some more questions. Would you like me to save those till the end, or do you want to go ahead and answer them right now?
Pretty much almost at the end, so let's hear them.
Okay. One person would like to know about if you could please give some book recommendations for readers in the novice or intermediate level. And if you don't want to do that right now, you can give me that information at the end, and we'll put it up when we put up the information. But if you had something off the top of your head, I thought I would give you that opportunity.
No, I'm really glad you asked that, because I do have a whole page of resources for graded readers. It's coming up in about 1 or 2 slides. So
okay, excellent.
Share that with you.
Okay, excellent. So we'll get to that one in a few minutes. And then there was just one more. It was about online resources for young students, student reading. Okay. Will you also get those resources at the end? Because I know you did have a big, long list of resources.
Yeah, of graded readers. Yeah, so fantastic, great questions. And there are a lot of, if you Google graded readers, you'll get a whole slew of websites. Some of them are free. Some of them want you to, or some of them are free to begin with, and then they want you to pay money for more access. Some of the reading texts are from, like famous stories, like the gift of the, is it the Magi or but they've rewritten it, so it's not really very good. So I think it's the sources that I'm giving to you are very reputable, good sources. I would go with those to start with. And they're free.
We do have one more question, and then I will cut out my video and you can finish up your presentation here. Do we need to measure the ability of critical reasoning?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm so glad you asked that question. Critical thinking is a skill like any other skill, and you can develop it by using critical thinking activities like some of the ones that are in this webinar. You need to have a rubric that is more complex. I mean, you critical thinking necessarily with true, false, or multiple choice examinations, but students who are presenting information that they've figured out on their own, students who are able to look at things from different perspectives. Basically, I think, to be able to measure something, you have to have objectives. And the objectives are going to be written in the form of students will be able to do something. So students will be able to describe the different points of view in this article or in this book of fiction, right? And it's a great question. It's probably the subject of another webinar.
Yes, it is. There's so many good things to say.
Yes, you can assess critical thinking, but you need to have a more complex rubric for it. That's my answer.
Excellent, thank you. Now we will just go on. It doesn't look like we have any more questions coming up or anything in the chat right now, so.
Okay, well, I've so much enjoyed this. These are the resources for graded readers, photos and art. American English, yay. They have so many great resources, ebooks, totally free, open source. Take them, use them. The British Council, Learning English Teens, it's more for like teenagers. The Extensive Learning Foundation has graded readers, free, open source. The New York Times has something called the Learning Network. Parts of it are free, parts of it they'd like you to pay for, but for educators, there are many, many free resources there. Open Culture is an open educational resource that has photographs, art, texts of all different kinds. The U.S. Library of Congress also has many, many open source materials, including beautiful historic photographs, posters, texts, catalogs, anything you might want. Good old Wikipedia has the Commons, which is an open educational resource also. Many, many photographs, texts, and so on. These are not the only places you can go to get free resources. There are quite a few others, but these are a great place to start. And I would, you can have many, many happy hours of roaming around.
Mindy, we do have one question about resources, and they want to know if you could repeat the name of the suggested resources books again. So I think you had mentioned a book at the beginning. I forget the name of it. And you have that in your resources. I saw it at least one of the times I saw your
in the references.
Okay, excellent.
Here it is. It's called there it is. Can I get it? There. Making Thinking Visible. It's got it's called the Visible Thinking Project. And these educators from Harvard and a lot of different places started thinking that about thinking, how to get students to think and how thinking visible so that it can be assessed, right? With that person I was talking about, how can you assess critical thinking? Well, you can make it visible in ways so that students are writing down things like sentence, phrase, word, right? Writing down lines of dialogue in a circle of viewpoints, or creating presentations with each other or I see, I think, I wonder. And these are great ways that you can help make thinking visible, help your students think and make thinking visible so that you can see what they're thinking.
Okay, excellent. We do have one more question here. I'll turn on my video since I'm asking the question. Do you think pre and post tests are necessary for every class?
No, I really don't. For me, it's pretty obvious in the first couple of assignments. I like to give my students more kind of, sort of formative assessments, let's say, as we're going through an assignment or going through a text. So, just those simple kind of thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs sideways. I understand, I kind of understand, I don't understand. Those are faster and more valuable than pre-testing. Of course, I mean, we're all in a situation where we have to test our students. It's part of the job. So there are certain constraints and, rules that we've got to live by. And one of those is coming up with for a student at the end of a semester that reflects their understanding of the key elements of that subject. So yeah, you have to test them. But I think in terms of pre-testing, I'd much rather do kind of formative assessments along the line than one exception for that is in a writing. I mean, this is reading. But in a writing class, I do like to have my students just write something up at the very beginning of the class, so I can just read through all of them and get a general idea for what the writing ability is and who might need extra help and who's strong.
Excellent. I will come back in my video. It doesn't look like we have any more questions here. Everyone's very grateful for all your insights. They have been, it was very informative and it was great. We're getting a lot of thank yous. I would just like to thank Mindy for sharing such wonderful ideas, practical ideas that we can all use to make our students more engaged in reading. And we're so thankful that you came and you were able to share this evening with us. I would like to invite you to join us next month on November 7th at the same time, 6 o'clock. It's a Thursday again, for Community in the Classroom, Methods for Creating a Safe, Warm, and Supportive Environment. Really excited about that because students learn much better when they are in a supportive environment. We have, I will send out a flyer for that tomorrow or the next few days. And remember, you can always get some updates. Follow us on, I was going to say Twitter or Facebook, but just Facebook, either AUA. And I put those up at the beginning of the chat, on the chat box, but I will also be sending those Facebook page links to the follow-up email that I will be sending all of you. So thank you very much. And we will see you on November 7th.
Okay, thank you. Is this webinar going to be available in terms of slides for participants?
Yes, and that was a question, so thank you for bringing that up before we sign off. We will have that up on the RELO Bangkok YouTube page, and I will put a link to that in the follow-up email.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I've had such a fantastic time. It's been a really wonderful hour with you. Trisha, thank you. You're a great facilitator. Thanks to AUA. Thanks to RELO Bangkok.
Thank you, and have a great night, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.